400,000 workers, 15 brand new towns, and a fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers. Russia is carving a new civilization out of the Arctic ice. The official story calls it Vostok Oil, the largest construction project on Earth, promising to unlock $110 billion in frozen resources. But this is more than an oil rush. It's an unprecedented battle against permafrost in time, where entire cities rise atop technology that didn't exist a decade ago. How did a desolate, unlivable wasteland become the center of the world's boldest industrial gamble? And what will it cost to succeed? Rosneft's ambitions on the Taymyr Peninsula go far beyond drilling wells. The company's 2019 blueprint called for the creation of an entirely new industrial civilization in the Arctic, on a scale that rivals anything attempted in the modern era. With a workforce planned at 400,000, Vostok Oil is not just a project, it is a population the size of a major city, deployed to an area that until recently was considered uninhabitable. 15 towns are mapped out across the tundra, each designed with its own power grid, medical centers, schools, and housing. These are not temporary work camps. They are permanent settlements, engineered to withstand months of polar night and temperatures that can plunge below -60 degrees Celsius. The plan includes 2 new airports, built to handle the constant flow of people and supplies that such a massive operation demands. Rosneft's CEO Igor Sechin pitched the project as a turning point for Russia's energy future, describing Vostok Oil as one of the most attractive targets for investment in the global energy industry. Behind the corporate language is a simple fact. This is an attempt to rewrite what is possible north of the Arctic Circle at a cost of over $100 billion. The numbers are staggering: 3,500 kilometers of electrical lines, 2,000 kilometers of pipelines, and millions of tons of machinery shipped in during the brief Arctic summer. Most of the world's mega projects build on existing cities and roads. Here, every kilometer of track, every power line, every building must be carved out of frozen ground. The sheer scale of the plan forces a historic comparison. No other oil field in history has required the simultaneous construction of entire cities just to make extraction possible. In the depths of the Soviet era, the Arctic frontier was conquered by sheer force. Norilsk, founded in 1935, became an industrial outpost built on permafrost by prisoners and conscripts. Soviet engineers poured concrete foundations directly onto frozen ground, ignoring the silent threat beneath their feet. As decades passed, buildings in Norilsk and the port city of Dudinka began to tilt and crack. The frozen earth shifted with every seasonal thaw, opening fissures in apartment blocks and warping rail lines. By the 1960s, entire neighborhoods needed constant repairs or complete replacement. Yet the drive for nickel, copper, and coal never slowed. Dudinka's river port, carved out of ice, kept supply lines open for the factories, even as the ground beneath them buckled. The cost of these methods was more than structural. In 2020, a fuel tank collapsed outside Norilsk, spilling 20,000 tons of diesel into the tundra and waterways. The disaster, traced to foundation failure from thawing permafrost, left a stain visible from space and forced Nornickel to pay a $2 billion penalty. For the people living in these cities, the ground itself could no longer be trusted. This legacy hangs over every new Arctic venture. The lessons from Norilsk and Dudinka are written in rusted steel, cracked concrete, and poisoned rivers. Modern engineers cannot afford to repeat the Soviet gamble. Instead, Vostok Oil's planners have turned to new technology: thermal piles designed to keep the ground frozen, even as buildings and pipelines hum with activity above. The evolution from brute force construction to climate-adapted engineering is not just a technical upgrade. It is the difference between a city that endures and one that sinks back into the tundra. The frozen ground of the Taymyr Peninsula poses an engineering problem that defeated generations of builders. At the heart of Vostok Oil's solution is a technology that keeps the Earth itself locked in place: the thermal pile. Unlike the concrete slabs that failed in Norilsk, these piles use the physics of cold to their advantage. Each one is a steel shaft driven deep into the permafrost, filled with a special refrigerant. As Arctic air chills the exposed upper section, The fluid inside sinks, drawing heat away from the soil below and releasing it into the atmosphere. This creates a self-sustaining cycle that keeps the ground frozen, no matter how much heat the buildings above generate. The Melnikov Permafrost Institute, named after the Soviet scientist who first charted Siberia's frozen soils, led the research behind this system. Their validation allowed Rosneft to commit to an unprecedented scale, 100,000 thermal piles planned, with more than 78,000 already installed by the end of 2024. These aren't scattered randomly. Each pile is mapped with precision, spaced to support the weight of pipelines, power stations, and housing blocks. Engineers monitor the temperature of the ground in real time, using sensors wired back to control rooms hundreds of kilometers away. If the permafrost begins to thaw, the data triggers adjustments, sometimes by adding extra insulation, sometimes by installing more piles. This approach is more than technical detail. It is the answer to the failures of the past. Where Soviet-era foundations buckled and cracked, the thermal piles of Vostok Oil hold steady. The ground remains solid, even as thousands of workers and millions of tons of machinery move above. In the Arctic, where the land itself can turn to mud overnight, this technology is the difference between a city that lasts and one that vanishes with the spring thaw. At the edge of the Kara Sea, a new port is taking shape that dwarfs anything Russia has ever built in the Arctic. Bukhta Sever, North Bay, stands as the centerpiece of the Vostok Oil project, a deep water terminal designed from the ground up to function where ice never truly melts. The port stretches across the permafrost coastline, its footprint measured in square kilometers rather than acres. Dredgers carve channels through ancient frozen earth, creating berths deep enough for the largest tankers on the planet. Unlike most ports, Bukhta Sever cannot rely on summer thaws. Its design assumes a world locked in ice. At the heart of the terminal, 16 cylindrical storage tanks each hold 30,000 cubic meters of crude, their steel shells rising above the tundra like artificial hills. These tanks are arranged in strategic clusters, connected by a network of insulated pipelines and pumping stations. The entire storage system is built on a lattice of thermal piles, engineered to keep the ground beneath permanently frozen, even as millions of barrels of oil cycle through above. This is not just storage, it is a buffer for the entire logistics chain, allowing the port to load and dispatch tankers as soon as weather and ice conditions permit. The construction process itself is a feat of coordination. Heavy-lift cranes assemble modules shipped in during the brief navigable summer. Prefabricated sections arrive by barge or overland convoy, timed to the hour to avoid delays in the narrow windows of open water. Specialized crews work in round-the-clock shifts, their equipment shielded against temperatures that can snap steel and freeze hydraulic lines solid. Every element, from the concrete used in the tank foundations to the insulation on the pipes, is tailored for polar extremes. Bukhta Sever is more than a terminal. It is the anchor for an entire industrial ecosystem. Without it, the oil fields of Taymyr would remain isolated, their resources stranded beneath the snow. With it, a new artery opens between the Arctic and the rest of the world, powered by engineering that refuses to yield to the cold. Convoys of heavy machinery and building supplies advance across the Taymyr Peninsula with the precision of a military operation. Every summer, as the ice retreats for a handful of weeks, barges loaded with earth movers, pipeline sections, and prefabricated modules push up the Yenisei River. The logistics chain must deliver 3 million tons of equipment before the Arctic closes in again. There is no margin for error. If a single shipment misses its window, progress halts until the next thaw. The heart of this operation is a pipeline 770 kilometers long, connecting the Vanker oil fields to the new Bukhta Sever terminal. Construction teams work in rotating shifts, driving insulated pipe sections into the permafrost, then welding and testing each joint in freezing wind. Progress is measured in meters per day, not kilometers, as the crews battle ground that is as hard as concrete. Sensors embedded along the route monitor for any sign of thaw, relaying data to control centers that can trigger emergency insulation or reroute flows if needed. A defining feat lies beneath the Yenisei River. Here, engineers completed a 5.8-kilometer underwater crossing, laying pipe at depths of 50 meters. The river's currents, choked with shifting ice even in summer, forced the use of dynamic positioning vessels and custom-built trenching machines. For weeks, teams worked around the clock, threading steel beneath the water while ice floes scraped at their equipment from above. The successful crossing proved that the supply chain could bridge even the wildest obstacles of the Arctic. As each segment is finished, the pipeline becomes the backbone of Vostok Oil's logistics. Fuel, supplies, and crude oil begin to flow in both directions, feeding the construction sites and eventually the waiting tankers at Bukta Sever. This entire operation depends on flawless coordination. Delays ripple through every part of the chain. If the port is not ready, oil backs up in the pipeline. If the pipeline stalls, the towns and terminals stand idle. Every shipment, every weld, every meter of progress is a calculated risk taken against the clock and the cold. Arctic shipping was once a seasonal gamble, dictated by the retreat and advance of the polar ice. For Vostok Oil to reach its targets of 100 million tons of crude each year, Russia needed a way to keep tankers moving through the Northern Sea route, even when the Kara Sea froze solid. The answer lies in one of the most powerful fleets on Earth, Atomflot's nuclear icebreakers. At the center of this armada is the Arktika class, a new generation of ships built to carve channels through ice more than 3 meters thick. Each vessel stretches more than 170 meters and delivers 60 megawatts of power, enough to split the frozen sea open for convoys of oil tankers. This is not just brute force. The nuclear reactors aboard these ships run for years without refueling, giving them the endurance to escort tankers from Bukta Sever to the Pacific or to the Atlantic, no matter how long the polar night lasts. With 5 Arktika-class icebreakers already delivered by 2024 and more under construction, Russia holds a monopoly on year-round Arctic navigation. No other country operates a civilian nuclear icebreaker fleet of this scale or sophistication. The numbers behind this operation are staggering. To move 100 million tons of oil per year, the Northern Sea route must handle a steady stream of Ark-7 ice-class tankers, each escorted by nuclear icebreakers through the thickest winter ice. Every shipment that once took a month to circle Eurasia by the Suez Canal can now be completed in just over half the time. For a route like Shanghai to Rotterdam, that means a 40% cut in shipping duration. The global implications are enormous. Russian oil reaches Asia and Europe faster, bypassing traditional choke points and slashing costs for every barrel. Atomflot's fleet is more than a logistical tool. It is the enabler of Vostok Oil itself. Without these ships, the Arctic remains locked away for most of the year. With them, the polar sea becomes a highway, and the resources of Taimyr can flow to the world in any season. The scale of this achievement is measured not just in tons of oil, but in the transformation of the Arctic from an impassable barrier into a cornerstone of global trade. Survival on the Taimyr Peninsula is a feat of logistics as much as engineering. At minus 60 degrees Celsius, the most basic routines, eating, sleeping, getting to work, become tests of endurance. The settlements rising here are designed to keep 400,000 people alive and productive in conditions that can freeze exposed skin in minutes. 2 new airports, each built to handle flights in polar night and whiteout blizzards, serve as the only lifelines for fresh supplies, medical evacuations, and the constant rotation of workers. Every building, from dormitories to canteens, draws power from a network of generators and substations with a combined capacity of 2 gigawatts. That is enough electricity to run a city the size of Warsaw, all devoted to keeping lights burning and water flowing across the tundra. Engineers must plan for every contingency, backup generators, insulated pipelines, and food stores that can last through weeks of isolation. The settlements are sealed against the cold with airlocks and heated corridors connecting every structure. In this environment, comfort is not a luxury, it is a matter of survival, engineered into every detail. Unlocking $110 billion in Arctic oil comes at a price that extends far beyond engineering budgets. Every barrel extracted from the Taimyr Peninsula carries the memory of Norilsk's disaster. 20,000 tons of diesel were released into rivers and soil after a fuel tank collapsed in 2020. The spill was traced to permafrost failure beneath aging infrastructure. It left a scar visible from orbit, and it cost Nornickel $2 billion in penalties. Environmental scientists warn that no amount of modern technology can erase the risks posed by thawing ground, shifting rivers, and the delicate Arctic ecosystem. For all the talk of innovation, the threat of another catastrophe lingers over every pipeline and storage tank. Sanctions have added a new layer of complexity. Western equipment and expertise, once essential for projects of this scale, are now out of reach. Rosneft has turned to domestic and Chinese suppliers, but the rapid overhaul of the supply chain brings its own uncertainties. Components built for temperate climates are now being stress-tested in the world's harshest environment. Each delay, each adaptation, raises the question: how much risk is acceptable for a resource valued at $110 billion? As the world watches Taimyr's transformation, the true cost of success, measured in environmental scars and geopolitical gambles, remains unresolved. Today, the Arctic's isolation is vanishing, replaced by pipelines, ports, and the relentless hum of industry. As Russia transforms permafrost into profit, global shipping lanes and energy markets shift beneath our feet. The world's coldest frontier is no longer a void. It is a proving ground for ambition, risk, and consequence. The question now isn't what can be built, but what should be. Share your thoughts below.